Hi everybody, welcome to this special CUBE presentation. We're here at IBM at One Madison. My name is Dave Vellante and we're exploring business transformation, but more specifically, how customers and clients can get value out of their AI initiatives and the new wave around business transformation. And with me is Tony Menezes, who's the Global Managing Partner for Intelligent Business Operations at IBM Consulting. Tony, thanks for spending some time with us.
Dave, glad to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
I love IBM titles. There's a lot to them, so let's unpack it. What does it mean to be the head of Intelligent Business Operations for IBM Consulting? How do you spend your time?
Great question, Dave. So the role that I'm responsible for and the team that I work with is all about how do we deliver value for our clients around their business operations. A lot of times clients will run finance operations, HR operations, procurement operations, and increasingly we're moving along with customer service and marketing operations and also some very specific industry operations. The issue here is, how do we actually take what clients have already started, and sometimes they've already centralized this in what they call their shared services organization or even their global business services organization, and try and really untap the value that these enterprises are doing within their own organizations and how we can add value to them along the way.
So I'm sure you're familiar with portfolio management approaches, and at a very high level, I like to look at, just to simplify things, run the business, grow the business, and transform the business, and they ebb and flow. Have you seen in the last couple of years, given the whole AI wave, that there's more of a focus on transform the business?
Very much so. In fact, if you look at the business that we're involved with, which is really around business process outsourcing and operations, it has evolved from being a very labor-centric business, where it started over 2 decades ago, to over the last 5 plus 7 years, kind of becoming more of a tech-infused business. But today, it's all around process transformation. How can we leverage the insights we have in running our clients' operations across all those domains and actually bring those insights to them, leveraging technology around the process to really give them a truly transformed operations. And in doing so, we're actually finding that there's a tremendous opportunity to unleash value for our clients. We do believe that GBS organizations or global business service organizations, can and should be growth enablers within the enterprise.
So again, to simplify things, CXOs, CFOs, CEOs, they want to drive more cash flow, put money at the bottom line. But there's an inertia in organizations, and there's a tendency to pave the cow path with processes. How do you sort of balance those, and what are you seeing, particularly, are you seeing any patterns in terms of AI flywheels and process flywheels that are emerging?
I think what we are noticing, quite honestly, is that because we take a look at how the work is getting done, we're able to tell clients with data that these types of work efforts is basically either unnecessary or, even better, how work can be done differently to unleash value. A lot of our commercial conversations we're having with clients is now we're putting our neck out to say we can deliver the outcome and we'll get paid on a percentage of that outcome that we delivered. That allows us to basically tell our clients what they can actually put up with us, or we can put up with them to be able to get to those types of results. So we talk about treading all paths. Yes, we have the experience and the expertise of what we've done, lessons learned from a lot of good things and some things not so great that we've done as well. But to bring that together for our clients, basically by tapping into that expertise, is what we're able to drive value.
Are clients actually going for the gain sharing, where you take a piece of the benefit?
They ask for it. They want it. There's a lot of times, they've got to be able to step up on their half of the plate to get it. But clients are expecting that more and more from their service providers.
That's actually would be a really interesting transformation in your business. Yeah. I could see in previous eras the attractiveness of doing that, because you have a lot of confidence that you can actually deliver that value. It de-risks it for the client, but the tail end, they could end up giving away a lot of money to a company like IBM who's so proficient at this. But so do you think it's different this time around, where customers, maybe there's a little bit more uncertainty, maybe they feel like there's a little bit more risk, and they will be more willing to do that type of gain sharing?
I think when we talk to clients about gain sharing, first of all, it also depends on where they are in their maturity to be able to actually truly understand what we're talking about. It's not just a sales pitch, but also be able to execute and deliver on it. One of the first things that we find in talking to our clients is that The harder part of doing this thing is actually getting the change management done within their own enterprises to be able to tap into the true value of what can be delivered from some of our solutions. So to us, it's actually a journey that we take with our clients. It's not the very first thing we would do for a client that's not yet mature, that's not yet gone to the baselining and understanding what their true operating costs and models are. But once we are able to work with our clients and actually be able to demonstrate to them what insights we have, what can be done, then it's a matter of what's the right commercial model to work with them on actually getting to that value. And sometimes it does take them to kind of say, look, if I'm going to put some skin in the game, then they got to be able to step up to their half of the bargain to be able to deliver on that skin in the game. But that's the level of confidence that we're able to bring to our clients in some of these engagements.
I think that's the key, is you've got the confidence in that, so you're flexible. You'll approach that either way. Can you help us connect the dots between the business strategy that you're delivering, the service delivery, and just sort of day-to-day business ops? How are you enabling customers to grow in that sort of
In that flywheel.
circle?
Yeah, so, increasingly clients are asking us, look, we didn't come to IBM to just lift and shift a bunch of work from one end of the world to the other. They're not only, the expectation of innovation in some of these processes is also almost a yesterday kind of expectation. Clients are actually asking us to say, one CFO basically told me, you know more about my business than any other consultant I would pay millions of dollars to just tell me what I know, what you already know. So how can you actually take that insights and actually be transformative? How can you step up and say, we will transform the finance operations, all the HR operations, all the customer service journey for our clients? And that's where I think we have the opportunity to be really different in delivering our values for our customers. So it's about taking the insights we've had, not only working for the existing clients, but also how that could transcend to other clients in the same industry at the process level. Process is critical here because that expertise is what actually allows us to be demonstrative to our client, driving the change that's required on the client side, and bringing technology to enable all of that.
Glad you mentioned process, because there's obviously a lot of buzz about agents and agentic, and we joke that there's a lot of agent washing. But processes, it's not just the data. The data is hard enough to get your arms around, but having that process knowledge seems to be fundamental if you're going to actually not pave the cow path and you're going to reimagine your processes, which is, I think, very important, because these startups are going to come out of the woodworks. You always hear these stories about 5 employees getting to $1 million, or 2 employees getting to $1 million of revenue in a week, kind of thing. Okay, maybe that's an overstatement, but it's illustrative of how things are going to change in this new era. So if you're an incumbent, you really need to rethink where your processes can be streamlined. So when you think about agentic AI, what are you seeing that's real? How are clients applying that with specific process knowledge, and what kind of outcomes are you seeing?
So the whole AI, Gen AI, agentic, has all been part of the hype. This industry has been subject to hype in the past and continues to be part of it. What our clients are actually asking us to show them is show me the proof points of how this can really work. They all want to crawl before they run. They all understand the hype out there. They're all trying to internalize it. Where we've been successful with our clients is to actually show them how it works in their processes, how it can change not only the work that we do for them, but the adjacent work that they've retained, and more importantly, how they should really kind of reimagine the way work can get done. The reimagine the way work gets done is a harder part of the discussion. It's an easier presentation or a sales pitch to make to a given client. It's them internalizing it and getting it into their entire organization that is the harder yards to walk through. And so we need to be able to demonstrate that to our clients and how we can do so. We've tended to do that where we've been able to demonstrate that within, POCs are dead, everybody's got enough of those. We actually are taking them and actually showing them on productive work within a small subset of the client's business. And once they see it, the buy-in is tremendous, right? You're going to be meeting with some of our clients throughout this narratives here. You'll see how they've taken a small part of what we've done for them and have actually exploded that across the enterprise. That's the way I think we're going to get people to buy into AI and agentic services. That's clearly there. You hear a lot of my colleagues talk about how we're actually making it real, but it's definitely kind of getting the proof points and getting the buy-in from the enterprise that's really critical to make it scale in the company.
Interesting what you just said, POCs are dead, and I agree in the sense that, okay, we got to get beyond the POCs. We've done a lot of experimentation in the cloud. The real value, high value data lives within my 4 walls, and I'm no way I'm letting that seep into LLMs if I can help it. So how do you balance that sort of near-term need with the long-term vision?
Right. So as the lead of the business here, right? So what we have told our teams and we encourage them is that they need to be prepared to cannibalize the current work we do for our clients by bringing all of these ways of working for our given clients. There's natural fear that, hey, I'm supposed to grow my business, I'm supposed to add value, how do I do this? What we found is that by actually driving value for our clients, we've actually expanded the overall pie of what we do for our clients at the same time. The trick here actually is to, if I take a process, let's take source to pay as a process. Clients buy stuff and then we pay stuff, right? We're involved in several elements of that process. Not 100%, because clients tend to retain certain parts of it, we do certain parts of it, go back and forth on how that entire process is done within a client. What we're able to show our clients is that how it's effective today, what it could be if it's actually done slightly differently, and where value can be unleashed. Sometimes it's simple policy changes. Sometimes it does require, a big ERP implementation at some point. But sometimes there's a lot of things in between that we can actually drive a level of automation, a level of insights, and a level of change in the way the work gets done to drive value. And by doing so incrementally and across the spectrum is when we actually do unleash value for our clients. As a result, clients are then saying, okay, can you now help me reduce the entire cost from that entire process, including what's done on our side of the fence and on your side of the fence? And that's when this is actually coming to be real in driving value for our customers here.
So I'm interested in how much of the confidence that you have that you can achieve those outcomes is from actual data, because everybody says we're in the early innings of Gen AI and this AI wave, which is true, but we've been in the early innings now for a couple of years.
Correct.
At this pace, we're starting to get toward the middle part of the game. So how much of that is actual data that you have from clients versus modeling from previous experience?
The advantage is that we've got a good incumbent portfolio across many different industries. So that gives us the insights to be able to say we can prove it to our existing clients, and then we can extrapolate and then deliver that for other clients, especially on an industry by industry level. It does start with data. If you go back, one is data, it's the operational level. We know how our clients are doing. We know how they benchmark against, at the process level, how they get benchmarked against others in the industry or best in class, et cetera. But then to make it real for a customer to adopt all of these new technologies, AI, agentic, and all the other things you threw out there, it does require us to be able to access the client data around that process. And we're working with our clients on how to extract that. We recognize they've made significant investments in their core systems, whether it's the ERP systems or the HRM systems or the CRM systems. So we're able to just leave those in place, but extract the data, manipulate the data that it needs to do to facilitate that workflow and push that data back. One very important thing in all of this, Dave, while we have a lot of focus around data and process improvement, this work is now getting to be a lot more digital operations. And it's critical that we actually have a consumer-grade experience for any consumer of this service. And to me, the consumer is the internal employee that's doing work in the enterprise. It's a supplier that supports that given enterprise. It's even customers of that given enterprise. And that consumer-grade experience is really critical because all of the digital work that we can do, if that experience sucks, they're not coming back, right? They're going to call back and they're going to go back to that labor-based play. And so this is really an important part of us. To us, the formula is process expertise, understanding where the client's data is to support those processes, and giving the consumers of that service a consumer-grade experience that really brings together the adoption of new ways of working that unleashes the value for our clients.
What you just described is actually a data transformation, whereas you're actually not sucking in all the data, putting it into yet another stovepipe, doing some analysis on it, and then it's now you've got another batch job. And it's an asynchronous process. You're actually describing what I sometimes refer to as a real-time representation of an intelligent enterprise. Is that where we're heading?
Data is it. I'll be honest with you. In fact, we've been debating as to what do we call ourselves when we approach our clients. Somebody even said we should call ourselves business data services was one of the names that came out there. But look, data makes all this work, right? It's about, and clients are struggling with this. It's a big issue. It's all over the place. There's no standards within the enterprise. People call the same things by different names. So we have to work with our clients to get that all to the right level, but we do believe that that's the way to unleash the value within the enterprise.
So last question, a lot of action obviously in the public cloud. Are clients prepared to go and bring that AI to the data? They're not going to put that proprietary data in the cloud, most likely. Why move it if it's working? I want to modernize it there, bring AI to that data. Describe the spectrum that you're seeing in clients across the board?
Well, if you go back and look at the types of services that we do, right, from financial services to HR services to procurement services to customer services, clearly the stuff that's customer facing, clients are able to consume it. It's a lot of that's already on the web or the internet. So some of that content that's product centric or service centric, obviously the clients are willing to let that be in the public cloud. When it gets to the financial systems and the HR systems especially, there's a lot of sensitivity to what can or cannot be used elsewhere. We are working with clients and actually bringing that in a hybrid way so that they can leverage the capabilities that's out there. We're working with them on models that actually make sense for their enterprise, and that's the journey we're on, right? So it is really about kind of giving the client the blend of what's appropriate for them to be able to achieve the objectives.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. Really
Thanks a lot.
appreciate
Appreciate it.
All right, keep it right there. We're going to dig deeper into how IBM is helping clients transform. We've got some customer case studies as well. This is Dave Vellante. You're watching theCUBE. Hi everybody, welcome back to One Madison. We're here at IBM's beautiful headquarters in downtown Manhattan, Midtown. Glenn Finch is here. He's a global managing partner for Gen AI and data. Glenn, good to see you again.
Hey Dave, good to see you as always.
So let's get into it. We're going to talk about all this agentic wave. We're going to talk about customer operations. Why? Let me start with why are things like contact centers and customer operations, why is that such a starting point for a lot of organizations?
Well, so when, for the last few decades, we've been doing machine learning. Mm-hmm. And machine learning is awesome with numbers, right? And then we went to NLP, natural language, and that's what a lot of the previous things were built on. Then we came out with artificial intelligence that started to speak and listen. But generative AI takes it to a whole new level, right? And when you think about it, its ability to speak, understand inflection, things like that, it makes it ripe with all the conversational spots in customer contact, in customer service, in field service that we might need to do.
Okay, so we went through the period of POCs.
Right.
We spun up a bunch of RAG-based chatbots. It was like, oh, hey, it works.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Vectorize the data. And
yeah.
Okay, now what? And that's where you're saying we are today.
Right.
So when we've got, single agent systems, co-pilots, if you will. We see Mark Benioff making fun of Satya Nadella and Clippy and all that stuff. Okay, yeah. So that's fun. But if I'm a client, I'm like, okay, I really want to get down and dirty with this. I want to transform my business. Right. So where are we with agents in agentic? Because it starts with a data problem. Mm-hmm. Take us through maybe how you guys are helping customers get to that transformative stage.
So I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask me first, just to kind of warm.
Help me out, yeah, sure. Thank you, Glenn.
So the interesting part about what happened somewhere in the fourth quarter, maybe third quarter, we started, use the word RAG. That's what hooked me. Anyway, we always use RAG patterns all year. And then all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, IBM and others start saying, you don't need a RAG pattern. You can use a teacher model. Right. So we launch Instruct Lab, right, which trains a model without a RAG pattern. You just ingest some documents, and it goes out and finds 1 million of occurrences that'll help with that.
That was around last May, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But it started getting popular in the third and fourth quarter. But that was the whole foundation of the whole DeepSeek thing. Remember that thing that shattered the markets for a while? It was the same principle.
It was interesting.
They used a teacher model, right?
Sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
But when I saw DeepSeek, I'm like, oh, that's like granite.
The reason I mention this to tie to your agent thing, for an agent to be successful, the concept of an agent is I'm going to orchestrate multiple models or long-running processes so I can drive value, right? That's the whole concept of an agent, right? And so you have agents that supervise models, and then you have agents that supervise agents, right? The bottom line is as you embed an agent into a business process, the model needs context. So let's say it used to take me 3 weeks to drive the context of a business process into a model. I can now do that same thing with that teacher model concept with InstructLab in 3 days. Mm-hmm. So I have the ability to enable now models and agents with context in a very short period of time, so that we would, where last year we'd be looking at multiple months to deploy agents, we're now seeing agents deployed in like a couple weeks, right? And it radically transforms how you approach a problem when you can ingest policies, procedures, flowcharts, whatever, from a client into a model without using RAG patterns, and then start creating agents from there. It's a radical different paradigm.
How does that data, whether it's a transaction system or an analytics system, whatever system it is, how do I harmonize that data to give it confidence so that the agents can act with confidence on that data?
Right. So there's two pieces of data we need to get our arms around. Mm-hmm. The contextual data that I was just talking about, that's generally stuff that's slowly changing over time, right? That's easier to get your arms around. It's usually mostly contained in unstructured format, although now as we advance more, we're starting to use more structured data to provide context, right? The transaction data, that's the $1 million question of what do I do? If I need to get a model or an agent to start looking at that, how do I do that without moving all of the data into the model, right? So there's a whole bunch of techniques with data virtualization that are getting better and better and better over time.
Something that IBM announced years ago, right?
I mean, but that was so we could do it analytically, right? And sometimes the service levels for analytics are different. I mean, I don't care if it comes tomorrow, but if you're thinking about the concept of an agent, I need that data there near real time.
Yeah, before I lose the customer.
Right, because I've got somebody on the phone, right? So how we do that depends on the scale of the enterprise, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. Up to a certain point, all the virtualization in the world works awesome. Until you have 100 million customers, then it's hard then you have to take smaller context windows, and then that's when you start to see a little bit more hallucination from the model. So it's not an easy consulting answer to tell you exactly how we do that. But we are using more virtualization techniques, more proxy techniques, things like that, to get the model, both the context it needs and the data it needs to do its job.
What is the conversation like, Glenn, with your clients, and what is IBM's vision around the relationship between the humans and the agents? What does that look like?
I don't know if you remember, Ginny declared that we had an AI treatise. This is our AI principles. But there's a whole bunch of things where we always have human in the loop, right? Whether it's a back office process, a front office process, those types of things, right? So clients are moving more and more towards being willing to let more things happen in a highly automated fashion, because what they find is that there's such high turnover rates in the contact centers that if all they do is just help stem some of the issue with turnover. I mean, some of these contact centers have 50% turnover. Massive learning curve, it's hard to sit all those kinds of things, right? So a lot of clients are saying, okay, for the excess or for the whatever, we're going to let, not a chatbot, but a digital virtual agent that can have a generative conversation with you. We'll let them, take calls. And what strange part is what we're finding is that the net promoter score, the client perceived value of those channels is actually higher than the call center. Because I don't have to wait, and there's a high likelihood I'm going to get the same answer every time, right? And there's another thing I'd love to talk to you about, which is to even improve that, this whole concept of generative user experience. So whenever you want to go there, I'm happy to go there.
So what I'm hearing is that the quality of your outcomes is so good that you can measure now
Yeah.
through customer sat.
Yeah.
Could you, maybe before we go there, could you give me an example of where this type of activity and AI has enhanced customer operations with BPO?
We have multiple clients that rely on us to deliver BPO in the contact center and other spaces. And I want to make sure that, in the BPO business, there's two types of contact centers. I've got a forward-facing customer contact center where, what's my account balance, right? But then whether it's HR, whether it's finance, whether it's procurement, there are oftentimes massive contact centers there because I want to know the status of my purchase order. I need to ask this question about this finance transaction. I need to change my work location, right? And we oftentimes find clients with 500,000, 2,000 person centers that are just answering the phones in the back office too, right? So in multiple examples through HR, through finance, through all those back office places, we're seeing both efficiency and efficacy driven, 50, 60, 70%. So you see those efficacy and efficiency plays, and I'd love to tell you that immediately customer satisfaction goes up like through the roof. Sometimes it does. Other times, like in our own case, we kind of burnt the ships. We turned off all the phone numbers. That wasn't the best strategy, right? So learning more, doing it to ourselves, we now know how to do that.
I mean, burning the boats in certain use cases might not be the worst thing in the world. It really is a forcing function, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It seems to me that agentic can play a role there in terms of not only how we interact with a natural language, but also reforming workflows, taking the human reasoning traces when there's an exception,
right,
and actually building that into a workflow.
Right.
Are we there yet? Do you have examples of that you can sort of point to say that this is actually working in the way in which we envision agentic?
Yeah, so we've spent the last 2 years working with both our own software company and our partners on doing just that, on taking all of the business processes that are in Tony's business and creating agents and workflows in orchestration tools, right? Whether they're IBM's Orchestrate, whether they're Power Automate, whether they're Copilot, whatever, they come under different names, right? Fundamentally, again, you have to teach those tools context, and then you help them learn the process, and they are pretty good at reasoning. There's still some things that they can't do, right? And then you'd flip out to the human. The new place where we're seeing agents roll out, and I'm going to switch to that Gen UI thing for a minute, right? We have a client that has a voracious web and mobile experience, but there is about 15 million times in a year that a client goes to the web and mobile and they don't get what they want. So they pick up the phone. So what we did is we used Gen AI to reverse engineer all those 15 million phone calls and build a generative user experience at the web and mobile. So that when Dave calls, your web and mobile experience is going to look dramatically different than when Glenn calls. Because I'm going to base it on what I know about you and what you're likely calling about. And then when that experience shows up and I prompt you with, hey, are you calling about these 3 or 4 things? Or do you have another question? What's crazy, it's the same experience you're used to on Amazon when, hey, do you want this thing? You want that thing? Right? to do that, generative UI, customer facing, you need a traditional machine learning engine to pick what to talk to Dave about, and then you need to hand that over to generative AI to create this generative user experience that's very rich, that's very contextual. Not, hey, Dave, your answer to your question is on page 22 of this 73-page PDF. Read it. No, I'm going to answer your question, and then I'm going to provide you with 2 or 3 things that you should have asked me about but didn't, right? That whole thing is just wicked cool, right? If you can take and offload those, more detailed, heavy detail calls that came from, a web and mobile experience that wasn't what it needed to be. So you used agents in the back to drive, cycle time. You use agents in the front to drive intimacy in a way that we never could before.
I like how you describe that. We use these terrible names like legacy AI,
right,
or non-Gen AI, AI, but you basically described a very complementary, hardcore math and science. On top of that is democratizes that user experience and enables just a completely new interaction.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It is awesome. Last question. Help me with the business case. Right. Give me the big 2 or 3 around customer service that we should be focused on to develop the business case, to take to management. Where's the value?
It all depends on how invasive you're willing to be with the end customer communications, right? The simplest thing is I've got an agent, a call center agent sitting there. I'm going to do call summary. I'm going to do research. I'm going to augment that, and I'm going to cut half of average handle time. Something simple like that, right?
Okay. So what if I want to be more aggressive?
Right. So then I look at the places, most likely you're going to have an IVR. You look at the places where people bypass the IVR and make a phone call, right? Again, you use generative AI to listen to the phone calls and basically create its own digital virtual agent, and then you enable that agent to go to the same place. Usually level 1 is simple questions, and then level 3 is I got to go look at page 22 of the 73-page PDF to get Dave's specific answer, right? You follow what a human would do, only you let Gen AI tell you how to do that, right? And that's where, pretty comfortably, you can take about half of all those calls and answer them or enable them to be answered with generative AI.
And I'm not playing whack-a-mole with turnover.
Right.
The humans that are there are actually interacting with the agents in a way that's enriching,
right,
and fulfilling.
Yeah, and the first we like starting at the desktop because it makes the agents feel better. So actually, when you deliver a lot of those things, call summaries, research, all those things, you usually see turnover decrease,
right?
Because it's not as hard, right? And then when the agent starts to be involved in answering more complex questions, then you see turnover decrease again because they feel better. They're not answering "What's my balance?" 400 times in a day, right? That kind of thing.
And I'm laughing because the call summaries, you listen to somebody type, "Hold on,
yeah,
you can't go yet." No, but right. I want to go. I've been on the phone for a half hour.
You got to wait for me. Yeah,
Clint, thanks so much. I really appreciate your insights and a great conversation. Really appreciate
same, Dave. Thanks.
All right, keep it right there for more action from One Madison at IBM. I'm Dave Vellante. We'll be right back.
The Cube Collective is a community of dynamic, independent thought leaders, industry experts, and professionals from across the enterprise technology landscape. The Cube has assembled a diverse group of executives, entrepreneurs, and innovators who collaborate to explore, amplify, and discuss emerging trends, innovations, and challenges shaping the future of technology. The goal of the Cube Collective is to foster knowledge sharing, spark meaningful conversations, and provide actionable insights based on decades of collective experience and data. Together, these experts analyze the most impactful developments at the cutting edge of the tech industry. Join the Cube Collective as they analyze the shifts transforming and shaping the future of technology.
We're back at One Madison. We'll continue the discussion. Now we're going to focus on workforce transformation and the impacts of AI on the human capital management. We're here with Jill Goldstein, who's the Global Managing Partner for HR and Talent Transformation at IBM Consulting. Thanks, Jill, for taking some time with us.
Thank you.
So the workforce, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? We get back to office, AI is taking my job. What's the state of the state with the workforce today?
Well, I will tell you that the workforce is actually really excited about the idea of leaning in and helping to rethink the way that business is accepting technology, specifically AI. And the most successful organizations are those that are asking the workforce to be part of rethinking ways of working and being part of the change.
I mean, I buy that. I don't know if you remember the RPA wave?
Yes.
Everybody was all free. But when you talk to people who actually adopted RPA, they loved it. At first they were concerned. And I think there's a similar dynamic here. Maybe it's, times 100 or 1,000 because we can all touch these LLMs, whereas RPA was a little bit kind of back office. But do you think that's a similar dynamic, at least in that sense, that people, once they touch it and realize the benefits of taking away some of that mundane, day-to-day drudgery, they fall in love with it?
Absolutely. I mean, actually inside of IBM, one of the first things that we did when generative AI really became very popular is we challenged our workforce to opt into a workforce challenge, an old school hackathon, where we asked them to roll up their sleeves and reimagine how they would work with a digital buddy, with generative AI helping them in their day-to-day activities. We had hundreds of thousands of IBMers leaning in and rethinking about how they were doing that work. And because they got to be part of the discussion, there was a level of excitement, and the adoption was actually a lot quicker than what we're seeing in other organizations.
So you guys obviously have a lot of experience internally, and you can bring that to your customers. Can you take us through sort of a little bit more detail what you did, how that helped transform your human capital management operation?
Sure. So the first thing that IBM did, and we did this years ago, was we made a visible commitment to responsible AI through trust and transparency. If you go on to IBM.com, you'll see our principles, our values associated with responsible AI. That commitment is external as well as internal. We also have a governance model that really allows us internally to have transparency into the way that we're applying AI into our internal operations. It gives us as employees confidence of how we will use AI, but equally as important, how we won't use AI. Because of that, I think there's a trust in the workforce and a commitment on how we're going to make sure that the workforce has a feeling of comfort about how their data is being used and how their job will be impacted. The second thing we did was exactly what I mentioned about that hackathon, that challenge. And the third thing IBM did that was spectacular is invested in increasing the technical acumen of the entire workforce. So that this way, individually, I understand what's happening in the news around me when we start talking about LLMs. I understand how to engage with my supplier who is introducing artificial intelligence into the platform that I'm using day in and day out. And even as an HR professional, I feel more confident in talking to my IT counterparts about what the future of AI is. Those are three things that IBM did across the entire workforce that helped us.
Oh, interesting. So you had to partner up with the technical folks.
That's right.
And so that what they could sort of ensure the governance and the guardrails, that was their role. You kind of shared with them the outcomes that you wanted, and then they kind of made it happen with their technical magic.
Absolutely. One of the things that our IBM HR department did very early on was to take some of our functional experts and start to teach them technical stuff so that we could create what I call purple squirrels. those people who have a unique set of skills that may be unavailable in the marketplace more generally, so that they can speak function and then turn around and speak technical. By doing that, we've been able to, I think, accelerate our digital transformation journey, which has been powered by AI. In our particular case, it's watsonx Orchestrate, but it is a similar pattern that we're seeing across other organizations.
There's always some trepidation. Where was the trepidation? Was it within the HR department thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to be out of a job? Or was it in the employee base, wow, I have to change how I'm doing things? And how did you overcome that?
So with the HR function, it was about making sure that they had the skills they needed for the new venture of their career, giving them options, giving them access to the resources they need to reskill themselves, and then giving them opportunities to advance their career path. As was mentioned before by Glenn, what we did with the workforce, though, was a little bit more of forced adoption. Right? Again, not something that I would recommend for all organizations, but what we did was we cut off many other access channels so that the only way for an employee to initially access HR was through what we call Ask HR, which is a digital front end to our HR organization. It matured over time. When we first introduced Ask HR, our NPS scores plummeted.
Really?
They did. They
that
plummeted.
must have been stressful.
It was super stressful, but the team hopped right on it, right? Mm-hmm. They were super agile. They spent time understanding content, understanding feedback, and would introduce improvements within 24 hours rather than waiting for traditional quarterly releases. And little by little, NPS went up. And I think the team would share with you right now that we are dangerously close to pivoting over 80 on our NPS.
Wow.
So it's spectacular.
Wow, that's like Apple NPS. I mean, that's tremendous.
It's amazing. The team has done a great job.
Congratulations. And you were alluding to, you're able to use your own internal tools. You talked about IBM's own AI. So you're sipping your own champagne.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go
Yes.
there. So you were able to apply that. So you kind of had a head start. How did you deal with the communications and the change management?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is we're fortunate enough that we have executive sponsorship. Mm-hmm. And when I tell you we have executive sponsorship, our famous ghost shopper is our CEO and chairman. It is not unusual for Arvind to go on to Ask HR and be self-sufficient, actually testing the same access channels that the workforce uses on a regular basis. So when you know the chairman may actually be part of the NPS pool, there's special attention paid.
Undercover boss.
That definitely helps with adoption. When you know when the CEO is testing it, sipping the same champagne, you tend to be a little bit stronger on adoption. The second thing is it's good. It's good. If I need someone, I can still get someone, right? When I go on to Ask HR, there's a big button that says, do you need to talk to somebody now? Is it urgent? And if I press that button, typically I get a call back or an outreach within 10 seconds. The difference is the outreach is from the right person in the right time zone with the right subject matter expertise and the right access to resources, rather than going to a generalist who then has to figure it out.
Have you now had other parts of the organization flock to you for learnings, which door not to go through, and what are some of the learnings that you might be able to share with us?
So last year, we introduced Ask IBM.
Okay.
Right? Following HR's success, we had Ask IT pop up, Ask Finance, and what we had found out is that we had unintentionally recreated old school automated call distribution, right? And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to minimize the burden that we had shifted to the employees to figure out which ask to go to. So we introduced Ask IBM. And so I, as an IBMer, just have to go on to Ask IBM to get a question answered. It's that aggregate learning that we're taking to our customers that they're really excited about, right? When you spoke to Tony and you spoke to Glenn, they all talked about the value and excitement we get from our Client Zero story. That's the Client Zero story that resonates so well with our clients.
And you're interpreting the customer, in this case it's maybe an internal employee, but their needs based upon a natural language interaction. You're not giving me I love these IVR systems where you have like so many conditioned response choices. You have to actually write them down. Number 2, well, it's not quite 2, but it might be. I'll
right.
write that down. It might
That's
come
right.
back to 2. It's just talk to me. I'm going to interpret that, infer, and then you said it's getting better is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the one thing I would mention is that a lot of HR organizations take the way they're organized in the back office, and that's the way they push the access channels out to their workforce. The key here is that the experience needs to be designed based on the consumer who's accessing the information or transacting business. It needs to anticipate my spoken or unspoken intention as a candidate, employee, a manager, an HR partner, an alumni. That's really when adoption is less of a heavy lift and something organically that happens because I know I'm going to get the level of service that I expect.
But it really is carrot and stick, right? You had a sort of a forced adoption because you pulled the plug on
That's
the
right.
old ways of doing things, but then you kind of made it useful and in a way fun and productive for employees.
And I would say that was because when we first started, we did exactly what I suggested most organizations did. Right? They took the way that HR was organized in the back office, and that was the way they pushed the information through Ask HR. They learned very quickly that in order for the adoption to be seamless, for people to want to use Ask HR as the first point of contact, they needed to totally rethink the way that Ask HR was presented to me as an employee.
So as you go to clients
Yes.
who want to transform their own HR interactions and department, et cetera, where should they start? Would you recommend that they, dive in and pull the plug if they have the appetite for it? Let's start there and then let's go to some that are more mature.
So the first thing they should do is get a handle on what those available access channels are and how they're using them today, and are they using them to their fullest? So that would be the first thing I would suggest, even with organizations who haven't gone on a very thoughtful, planned strategic journey, is they already have some breadcrumbs there that they can use. That would be the first thing. The second thing would be to understand where your organization's pain points or opportunities are right now as it relates to the workforce. I will tell you generally, as we talk across clients, across industries, across geographies, there tends to be opportunities where employees are joining the company, leaving the company, or transferring roles within the company. So although there may be some specific to the organization, those 3 tend to be pretty consistent across the organization. So that is typically where organizations will start. You'll hear them talk about onboarding new joiners. And then the third is for those organizations who are more mature that realize that employee intention doesn't arbitrarily start or stop in the context of HR. It's across the entire enterprise. And so an employee may want to know the status of an expense report. It's an employee inquiry that doesn't typically reside within HR. And so when you're really redesigning the experience based on the voice of the consumer, these arbitrary back office silos disappear, and you are really thinking about the entire enterprise.
The onboarding and the offboarding and the one in between is sort of moving within the company. How transformative was this initiative to those sort of pieces of the puzzle? I mean, onboarding, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty a pretty well-known process, but maybe not. Maybe it's a little bit different for different countries. And so I'm curious as to were those like exceedingly transformed or not so much because you understood it better?
When was the last time you were a new joiner?
Yeah.
Right? So what happens in many cases is the new joiner shows up day one and they have actual or virtual paperwork that they have to complete.
Right. Yep.
They don't have a workspace available. They haven't gone through training. They don't have their safety equipment. They don't know what their schedule is. And the manager of that new joiner has a checklist that may like 20 items long of things they needed to get to but didn't. And so the new joiner experience is horrible. They're not being productive. They're not servicing your clients on day one. For the first few weeks, they're catching up on things that could have been done before their actual first day.
Right.
So when you rethink the new joiner experience, you engage with that new joiner as they're accepting an offer to become part of your organization. You invite them to be part of your community where legally permissible. You ask them to do some training. You help them engage and give them visibility that you're setting up and being prepared for them. You maybe even send them instructions on how to get to your building with the availability of public transportation and available parking. It shifts from being an administrative process to an experience where the person feels valued that they're coming, and they're actually productive day one, which is pretty good for the organization.
That's huge. That is great.
huge.
Thank you for that description. Do you golf?
I do not.
No, I don't really golf either, but there's a term called a mulligan, right? If you have to, it's a do-over. If you had a mulligan, what would you do differently?
A lot of organizations have transformed their HR function through the deployment of Cloud HCM, Workday, SuccessFactors, Oracle HCM. And they did it because they wanted to modernize their organization and provide their HR organization and workforce with access to tools. But in retrospect, as they think about that deployment, they treated it a little bit too much like a technology deployment and not an enabler of a fuller transformation. So they didn't review policies, they didn't do end-to-end process, they didn't think about their data dictionary, they certainly didn't think about their experience. And so they're now looking at this big investment and they're not realizing the value they got from it. So the one thing I would suggest organizations do first is to figure out how to maximize their investment and take advantage of capabilities like AI and generative AI that are organically available to them. Marry it with different parts of the enterprise, like Microsoft Teams or ServiceNow, and then also consider how to orchestrate all that together with the benefits of watsonx Orchestrate. I mean, I really think it's a beautiful recipe for success, but they need to start with their Cloud HCM where most of the data and organic capability exists.
That's such an important point you're making, and it's actually in your title, because your title is HR and Talent Transformation, because you're right. That's our industry. We say, okay, well, you got core HR, and over here you have talent management, and those are separate things, and we've got separate software for that. Do you want to buy some? And it's like, well, wait a minute, and you have a different perspective on that, really a whole system view.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, organizations are not deploying technology for the sake of deploying technology. They're doing that for business value. And the only way you're going to get the business value is to treat it as a transformation rather than just a technology deployment.
Super exciting times, Jill. Thank you so
course.
much for sharing your stories with us. Really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
You bet. All right, keep it right there. We'll be back right after this short break. I'm Dave Vellante, and you're watching theCUBE.
theCUBE, the leading source for technology news and analysis, with exclusive access to the hottest technology events from around the globe. In-depth interviews with industry giants and innovative startups disrupting the landscape. Tune in live or catch the action on demand at thecube.net for current real-time conversations. theCUBE, extracting the signal from the noise.
Hi everybody, welcome back to theCUBE's special presentation where we're digging into business process optimization, and this is really the customer drill down. Of course, we're doing that here at the NYSE. I'm here with the CFO of Cemex, Maher Al-Haffar. Great to see you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Hi Dave, how are you doing? Great to be here with you
Not your
today.
first time at the NYSE, I know.
Yeah, I think I've been here a few times. I love this place. It has
Deeply
such history.
embedded.
Absolutely, it has
You've
such
got
history.
it's such an interesting career, and your company is quite amazing. I've been doing a little research on it, but tell the audience about Cemex and what you guys do.
Sure. Well, I mean, Cemex is one of the largest building materials companies in the world. We have really 4 verticals: a cement vertical, which is the old, that's how the business started. Then we're also the biggest ready-mix producer around the world, and we're a very large aggregates producer. And then very recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, we started a new portal, which is very complementary to our core businesses that were there for many years, which is Urbanization Solutions. And there we do a lot of things that help us decarbonize, recycle, and do a lot of very profitable things at the margin, but also very complementary to the core businesses that I just mentioned. So we're a $16 billion company. Right now, we're about a $10 billion market cap. You know, 24 was a great year, coming off of a fantastic year in 21. We had record earnings in 21 and 20. I'm sorry, 2023. Sorry about that, not 21. And so you know it was a so we've had a very nice growth trend over the last 4 or 5 years. We're one of the largest in the U.S. We're in the Sun Belt of the U.S. where we think that's where the best client metrics in the future are because of demographics, because of growth. So we're in Florida all the way to California. We're also the biggest in Mexico, in South Central America, Caribbean. We're also, have very large operations producing and trading in Europe, Middle East, Africa as well. So it's a global company. We have about 45,000 people around the world, and I'm the CFO of the company. Have been actually June of this year. It'll be 5 years. My boss, our CEO, who called me up literally in the middle of the pandemic and said, we're having a little bit of a change in the executive committee. I would like you to take over the CFO position. We were all at home, and it took me about 3 seconds to kind of say yes. And then after I thought about it for a couple of more minutes, I said, what the heck am I getting myself into, And in reality, it's been the most fun job I've had in my life, in my professional career. So it's been really, really wonderful.
And your CEO is stepping down after like 35 years.
35 years, yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Just announced effective end of March, he will be retiring. He, as he said it, retiring to go to another set of things that he wants to do in his career, and that we've announced already. The board already chose our new CEO, Jaime Mugiro, who was the president of our U.S. operations, which has been doing terrifically well. I mean, between the U.S. and Mexico, that probably accounts for almost 85% of our operating cash flow generation, and the U.S. is the area of single focus in terms of growth over the next few years. I mean, we've been investing a lot over the last decade and a half. We think it's the best place to be in the world on a risk-adjusted basis. And the markets that we're in the southern parts of the U.S., I mean, you hear huge companies moving into Texas, into Florida, into Arizona. It's just absolutely booming.
Data center build-outs.
Absolutely.
And,
And
the whole
then
thing in
the
Abilene.
housing market is also very interesting there. So we're very excited. We've always, ever since I've been in the company, we've always been allocating capital to the U.S., but we're accelerating that, and we think that it's probably the place to be of all of the rest of the world.
And you're locating proximate to those areas because you're moving, your products.
Absolutely.
And so
cement. Cement doesn't lend itself to a lot of transportation. Cost of the cost per ton, when you compare it to cost of transportation is fairly low. So you tend to produce where you're going to consume. So
Plus it turns into a rock fast.
Well, that's the ready mix you're talking about. The cement, or clinker. You can transport it. But generally speaking, you don't want to be beyond a couple hundred miles away. In the case of ready mix, you're talking within 3 to 4 hours of batching it. You need to be pouring it. Otherwise, it starts losing cementitious qualities. Aggregates can travel, but again, very local businesses. So we need to be very local, and we're very much a function of local demographics, local business supply and demand conditions in our markets.
Now you have your $16 billion company with a roughly $10 billion valuation. So I'm sensing upside there. And now you guys have a big sustainability initiative.
Absolutely.
And when I think about sustainability, there's a big backlash on DEI and all that stuff, but you guys aren't in it for virtue signaling. You're in it as a CFO. It's dropping. There's business value in that sustainability. I don't wonder if you could talk about that.
Look, the reality is we are in it for both, right? We are in it because we think it's the right thing to do.
Sure.
We do believe that the world is heating up, and we do believe that our business does contribute to, greenhouse gas emissions, particularly CO2, part of the industrial processes and the fuels that we use.
So it's a responsible thing to do.
So it's a
to take that
responsible
on,
thing to do. But having said that, when we are investing in decarbonization, it has what I call double materiality. In other words, it decarbonizes the business, but also has a very positive impact on the bottom line. Most of our investments are really retrofitting our plants to be able to use alternative fuels, to be able to come out with different products that have low carbon cementitious materials in them, or low cement content in them, and they're very profitable. Payback periods, between 3 to 4 years. We have IRRs in those businesses that are well in excess of 30%. So very exciting stuff. So again, the double materiality is really what I would say is the buzz phrase here. It's good for our decarbonization strategy, and it's good for our profitability. And if we take a look at what we have done in the last 4 years, I mean, we've reduced our carbon emissions, CO2 emissions by about 15%, which is probably, and I may be off by 1 or 2 percentage points
Sure.
on that, but that's the equivalent of what we could have done in 15, 16 years in the past. So we made it a real front and center target and goal to decarbonize. We follow it every month in our executive committee. Even our compensation, frankly, is partially connected to how we perform on our decarbonization targets. So everybody's aligned in the company, not just emotionally but financially, to make sure that we get those targets in place. So we're very happy, and I think we're, without exaggeration, I think we're probably one of the most aggressive, in a good sense, in reducing our carbon emissions in the industry today. And so we're very happy with that. And from the financial side, Cemex is one of the co-founders of the UNGC CFO Coalition. And I actually, sit on the advisory board of the CFO Coalition. And one of the things that we have done as well is aligning our financial strategy to decarbonization. So Cemex has the most aggressive, in a good sense, target to align our funding to decarbonization metrics by 2030. So we're targeting about 80% by 2030. That's by far the highest within the industry.
Now, that's a big part of the transformation that you guys have undergone since you took over. You've expanded the TAM, or maybe not. I mean, you've got these 4 lines of business,
Yep.
So you're getting those fine-tuned. How would you just summarize the transformation over the past, say, 2 to 3 years?
Well, I mean, I think it's been great. I mean, if I take a look at the new portal that we started, the Urbanization Solutions business, I mean, that's been growing double digits. It's now representing slightly more than 10% of our operating cash flow generation in the company, and it's super profitable. I mean, it's increasing the profit margin quite nicely, and we're probably going to continue allocating capital to that business, and it's helping us get into really develop many inroads in developing low carbon products for our customers. And it's also helping us do what I call urban mining, right? Recycling buildings that are having to be torn down and reconstructed, especially in very large urban mature geographies like Europe, to some extent in the US. So we take some of the demolition waste, recycle it, and we can use it either as aggregates or use it as raw materials, and that's really very exciting because not only, it's very profitable, but also, you're recycling. So you're part of being good, with society and making sure that we're not just, dumping everything, burying everything, which is not the best thing in our view.
I want to tap your CFO brain in terms of how you look at investments and capital allocation.
Sure,
You mentioned a 30% IRR in your businesses.
Right.
So, I mean, oftentimes technology investments are risky and they've got a higher hurdle rate because of that risk. So that brings me to the topic of AI and automation. How do you think about that? There's a lot of talk, there's certainly a lot of hype, there's a lot of talk about uncertain ROI. How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Dave. And I have to tell you that when I took over as CFO back in June of 2020, after kind of spending some time, maybe, I don't know, a month or two, thinking about the world and all of that, one of the things I thought, what should define my being CFO at the company in the areas that I'm responsible with? And I told my team, I really would like us to kind of be the guys who ushered in the digital CFO. So we looked at, and I'm responsible for, all of the accounting, controllership, legal, a significant amount of the shared services, back office areas, procurement, And so what we did is we went through all of these areas and we said, where can we adopt state-of-the-art technologies? And to me, I gave a very big instruction to the team. I said, I don't want to digitize existing processes. It's very important that we get the data in a massageable, in a analyzable format. So we spent a couple of years taking all of our data from our ERP systems, which are not necessarily connected to each other, put it in a data lake, cleaned it up, came out with all of the, cleaned up, consolidated numbers, which then was giving us the ability to use middleware to do a bunch of analytics, trend analysis, process redesign. And that's where we started getting together with people like IBM, frankly. So to me, the use of technology in the finance function, and virtually everywhere in the company, but in the finance function, from my perspective, is pervasive. I mean, we're using, we're using artificial intelligence. We're using, ARPs. We're using, a digitized process flow, platforms, for instance, like ServiceNow. We used to do a lot of this stuff either manually or quasi-manually. Now it's all digital. And now we have tons of data that we can use digital technologies and artificial intelligence technologies to actually run through millions of transactions and come out with analytics that tells us, these processes can be changed this way, can be redesigned this way. So it's not just using digital for digital's sake. It's really kind of redesigning the workflow process in the company. We use a lot of, for instance, analytics in operative support, for instance, for the commercial guys. My guys produce all that numbers and support all of the commercial guys in their interactions with their clients. Tons of analytics go on there. It saves heads, but really at the end of the day, we're not looking at using AI to reduce headcount. It's really to take average capable people to superlative capabilities within the organization. So becoming substantially more efficient, being able to be substantially more productive, value added to the whole set of stakeholders that are within the company. And I think we're just scratching the surface, frankly. I mean, we're just starting to do that. And I'm very excited about the future of using technology, and particularly AI. I mean, the faster computing, the cheaper the computing gets, the more we can use it to almost as a second brain for us while we're conducting our business. Now, of course, the human mind will never be redundant. It's just becoming significantly more superior because this kind of co-pilot concept, which is the AI facility.
It's like Ray Kurzweil says, that AI makes you smarter. Nobody wants to give that up. Nobody wants to be dumber.
Absolutely.
But so much to unpack there, Maher, from what you said. The first thing that really I want to ask you about it, which is really interesting to me, is you're not looking to, I call it pave the cow path on process. You're not looking for little tiny incremental improvements.
No.
You're using your data to reimagine workflows, and you're able to identify that because you've consolidated the data, you've harmonized it so that whether it's your Salesforce data, your ERP data, or your finance data, whatever it is, you now have trust in that data, it's governed, and then you can make decisions that drive massive productivity gains.
Well, and traceability. I mean, the other thing is now we have real traceability of all workflow processes through the whole process, right? And so then we're able to say, okay, who's best to actually undertake those processes? Is it internal people? Is it better to team up with partners like IBM, for instance, that help us, co-process some of these workflows at a much lower cost, at a much faster pace? They have many clients. They have different technologies that they can bring to the table. So it reduces the need for R&D in AI for us, for instance. So there's a lot of, I would say, synergies as a consequence of having this, these data and data analytics that allows us to think differently, very significantly differently about these processes.
You mentioned you're not using AI to reduce headcount, but is it correct to think that that AI will reduce your requirement for future human labor, or
potentially, yeah, potentially. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think obviously we're going to make our existing team much more powerful and much more sophisticated in terms of the services and analytics that they can provide to the organization, and of course, it will probably slow down the growth of that element of our business enablers, right? But at the end, I mean, of course, if the business continues growing the way it has been growing, obviously we'll continue to grow our headcount.
But it could give you more operating leverage.
Absolutely, absolutely. No. I mean, the operating leverage of technology in the business is super powerful, and it's not just risk management. I mean, the ability to use AI in risk management, and for instance, in energy hedging, for instance, electricity hedging, fuels hedging. I mean, one of my procurement guys, for instance, is using AI to minimize the inventory of fuels by constantly calculating cost of fuels, distance of fuels, cost of transportation. If the Panama Canal is being bottlenecked, if the Suez Canal is shut down because of political factors, all of this stuff is constantly, scenarios are being run, and then we talk to our operating partners and we say, you know what, you don't need this much inventory, you need this much inventory. We modulate that. All translates to working capital needs, which translates to costs in the business. So to the extent that we can fine tune that, we use that in insurance. We use that in our financial hedging strategies. For instance, a big chunk of our operating cash flow, for instance, comes from outside of the U.S. We're a dollar-denominated company. So the finance guys that are running our derivatives hedging strategies, for instance, one of the first things that we said when I first joined, I said, look, I don't want guys who are trading emotionally. I want a rules-based process that is very data-driven and very digitally driven on when we put in and when we take off hedges based on a number of factors. And we work with a bunch of our banks, doing simulations on 20, 30 years worth of historical data, which now gives us the ability to kind of doing it, with quantitative, with artificial intelligence tools that gives us a much more robust and much more stable
do the
risk
what ifs
management
and-
perspective.
yeah,
Absolutely,
amazing.
absolutely.
Kind of off the wall question, but
There's no such thing.
Where are autonomous vehicles in your future? Is it decades away, do you think, or is it something that you guys think about in the more near term?
It's an issue. We would love to have autonomous vehicles. One of the things that the company, it's the most top of mind thing is health and safety of our employees. And over the last number of years, we have become the best health and safety company by virtually any metric in the industry.
Really?
Absolutely. I mean, our CEO, that's the first thing that we, every month we have a monthly executive committee. First thing we start with is health and safety. Very important because, we have this motto, 0 for life. One life is lost is too many.
Amazing.
One, because it's the right thing, but also because it's also the most financially good thing. And third, our executives and employees really appreciate that we understand that each one of them needs to go back to their families at the end of the day. And there are so many families dependent on these folks. And so we want to make sure they're doing that. Now, why am I saying that? Because let's face it, a lot of the injuries come from mobile situations, right? And so we would like to get into autonomous vehicles, but I think we're far away from that. Number one, because of the technology. Number two, because of the cost. We're looking at, going to EVs, for instance. Again, we'd love to do it. And there's some very interesting offerings out there. But still, an EV is probably 2 to 2.5 times the cost of a traditional vehicle. But we are starting to, pilot some EVs. Definitely in our quarries, it would be interesting to start looking at autonomous vehicles, for instance. But these are big yellow iron type of vehicles. They're not yet there. We're not that yet.
But it's a more predictable
But it's
environment in the
absolutely
quarries.
much
and
more
you can do some
predictable.
learns there.
And it's like, we're sitting here in the studio, for instance. There's a lot of technology here. There's a lot of remote work that is being done here. There's no reason why we cannot replicate this kind of technology outside in our quarries, for instance,
Right.
or delivering ready mix, or in our plants, for instance. But I do think that's a few years down the line. frankly.
I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
I know you got to get up, Tom. So my last question is how do you think about the role of FinOps as a strategic enabler for the business, aligning with the business? I wonder if we could kind of summarize there and give our audience some of your take, your philosophy, any advice you'd give to other folks, your peers, trying to transform their businesses.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we can deliver in many ways. I mean, we talked about data-driven decision making. That's probably the most organic, most robust thing that we can give. And capital allocation decisions, very, very important as well. I mean, how do we make capital allocation decisions? What if scenarios? Working with our planning and strategic planning partners, for instance. Risk management, we've already talked about that, whether it's hedging strategies, whether it's insurance insurance risk management, for instance. Evaluating investments, another part that we partner up with. Operative support to our frontline folks on how to manage their business by giving them trend analysis, what if scenarios, drill down, trend analysis, for instance. These are all very important areas that we can deliver to optimize not only facing out to customers, but also facing internally to our internal stakeholders. The other thing is on the procurement side and supply chain. And I'm responsible for the procurement side in the company. And one of the things that in the last year and a half we've identified significant opportunities, not only using technology, but also identifying who we buy stuff from, at what time, when, at what price. Are we buying from original manufacturers? Are we buying from intermediaries? What can we do to close those gaps? What can we do to identify goods or services that should be negotiated locally, regionally, globally? What kind of synergies we can get from those things? These are all powerful, value contributors. I mean, the procurement thing we just said that just the other day at our fourth quarter results call. We're expecting close to $250 million worth of savings on our procurement over the next 3 years. And I think we're just scratching the surface. I think there's a lot more opportunity in doing that. We could not do that 3-4 years ago without the use of state-of-the-art technologies and artificial intelligence, especially artificial intelligence in this process. It's critical to success.
Remarkable business and a remarkable career. Thanks so much for spending
Thank you very
some
much.
time
Thank
with
you.
us.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Really
Appreciate
it.
it.
You
Nice
bet,
being here.
Maher.
Thank you very much.
All right, and thank you
Take
for
care now.
watching. We're just thinking about this transformation. As Maher said, we're just at the beginning, on the cusp of this new wave of business process optimization. Thanks for watching. This is Dave Vellante for theCUBE.